Hey, hey, everybody, it's Mark Pattison. I'm back again with another fantastic episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. And before I get into today's amazing guest, I just want to make sure that you stop by my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com. And there you can find 200 plus other episodes of my other podcasts that I've done. And if you'd please go in and check those out, and you'll be inspired like I am every day. And always, it helps to have ratings and reviews of the episodes that you like. It helps with the popularity of the show. It's not about me. It's about trying to elevate so other people can be inspired. We all need that. Also, there's the philanthropy tab. We continue to raise money for Higher Ground through Amelia's Everest. And we have a movie that's coming out. All funds and proceeds are going to Higher Ground. It's going to be very cool. It's called Searching for the Summit. The NFL has done on me regarding my pursuit up and around the globe on the 7 summits, as well as Mount Everest. And then there's other cool stuff too, daily stuff coming on. So I'm just trying to think as we go through here, but let's jump into today's guest, Jeff Strueker. Jeff, how are you doing?
It's great to be with you, man. I'm doing good.
Yeah. I was getting kind of hung up because I was thinking about that. I've got so much stuff going on right now with the movie, and there's a book, and there's my podcast, and there's philanthropy and all this other stuff. I was trying to wrap my head around that. But the one thing that's cool about you, and I'm really excited to talk to you, you've got equally as much stuff going on. And, I was checking, your background out and did quite a bit of research. And, the first thing I have to say, especially in today's environment, is, without having all these other things you've done in terms of film, in terms of the 5 books that you've cranked out, is your service to this country over 22 years. And I'm always fascinated on, how people pick that journey. When I was coming out of high school, I was a pretty good football player. And so I was being recruited by a lot of places. One of the places that was hot on my trail was the Air Force Academy. And it finally got to a point where I didn't feel like I was mature enough to go at 18 years old and go through boot camp and then football camp and then football. And then that's 4 years. And then there's another 5 years of commitment after that. And I didn't feel like I was ready to take that on. And so I'm always fascinated when I talk to somebody like you, who you're so accomplished within that field at 22 years that you served out there as a U.S. Army Ranger. Where did that all start to begin? Was there a mentor in your life that really, shot you into that space?
Yeah, no, I actually totally did it on a whim. I'll tell you exactly how I ended up in the Army in just a second, but I just want to tell you, man, you made the right decision, because if you would have went to the Air Force Academy, as awesome of a football player as you are, you probably would have ended up in the back, on the front seat of an Air Force jet someplace instead of on the gridiron. So made the right call there, buddy.
Thank you.
I made a kind of a spur of the moment decision while I was still in high school. My buddy had just enlisted in the Army. No one in my family had any real military experience, and nobody was pushing me in this direction. I was living in a small town in the Midwest, and there was no future. If you didn't own farmland, you didn't have a future in this small town. So I'm a senior in high school, just about ready to graduate. My buddy just went to a recruiter and said, "Hey, Jeff, I just joined the Army. You should join too, because it'll be cool." That's what kids in high school talk about, right?
Yeah.
What he didn't tell me is that the Army was giving him more money if he could convince an idiot like me to sign up. He'd get a little bit more enlistment money out of it. But I kind of went to a recruiter on a whim and asked the recruiter a dangerous question and basically said, "What's the toughest job in the Army?" And he steered me towards the Army Rangers. And that's what I ended up spending basically my entire military career doing.
That's just really incredible. And as you get into it, and just explain to the people like myself who don't have a military background, when you get into it, what kind of commitment are you signing up for? That's question one. And the other question attached to that is then whatever the answer is, what would propel you to say, you know what, I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to sign up for another chunk and chunk and chunk. So, you put it all together and it's 22 years.
Sure. I started out not knowing what I was getting into. And in fact, this Army recruiter was working with me, trying to be really honest, and said, "Listen, kid, you don't have any idea what you're asking when you're asking for the toughest job in the Army. And I want to make sure you know what you're getting into. So go home and watch this documentary. And it wasn't an Army propaganda tape. It was basically a 2020 documentary about the rigors of Ranger School. And I took this videotape home, watched it, and in 5 minutes, man, I was hooked because it showed some of the strongest, toughest guys in the country, actually from all over the world, because other countries will send warriors to this training. And in the first week, 60, 70, 80% of them will wash out. And I just really wanted to test myself. That's one of the answers to your question, why I would ask for something like this. But the second answer actually gets a little bit into my faith. You see, I moved around a lot. I grew up with this really vivid and terrifying fear of dying. And when I turned 13 years old, this fear of dying I had for many years as a child. When I turned 13, my neighbors talked to me for the first time, and they explained to me who Jesus was, and they talked to me about sin, and they told me basically what happens to a person after you die. I got a chance to think about what my neighbors said to me. It made sense. One night, as a 13-year-old, I got out of my bed and I knelt down beside it and I prayed and I asked God to change me and to do a miracle in my heart. And I asked him to take away the fear of dying. So I'm telling you this because when I went to the recruiter's office that day, I wasn't about to tell him out loud. The reason I'm asking for this is because I want to go to combat. I want to get shot at, and I want to know if I'm really over this fear of dying. But I do want to say my first year or two in the Army were absolutely miserable. And I thought often, man, I messed up. I made a mistake. This isn't for me. And then after maybe a year and a half or 2 years or so, I started to really understand how significant this job was to the future of the country. I started to look at the guys that I worked for and their level of commitment to our freedom. And it changed things for me. And I think that's the moment where I got bit with the bug and just fell in love with being an Army Ranger and didn't want to do anything different. It took me a couple of years to get to the point that I learned to love it.
Well, sometimes that's the way it goes. And for the audience, I want you to hang in there for just a minute because I've got some other questions to ask, but we're going to get into Jeff being a part of Black Hawk Down. What an intense movie, of course, held in Somalia. But you know, my power of curiosity has me saying at 13, you know, you're waking up and you're terrified that you're going to die. But was there a traumatic event between 0 and 13 that led you to, you know, of all the things that we could think about? And we've got Speed Racer and, you know, just cartoons and all the stuff that normal, you know, like adolescents, you know, up to a certain point are thinking about. And you've got this, I'm not going to call it an obsession, but you've got this thing on your mind that's kind of on the forward there that has you thinking about things that most kids aren't thinking about at that age.
You're a pretty wise man. I don't know that I can point it back to any one thing, but it is really almost a borderline obsession. I can still remember this vividly as a child because I didn't grow up in a church home. No one really talked to me about church, about God, about anything after life after death. So I remember laying in bed and I just remember thinking, okay, what happens to you after you die? Where do you go? What is it like? And the more questions I asked, the more anxious and terrified I started to become. So I spent a lot of nights awake all in my bed at night as an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, just asking questions that I didn't have any answers for and didn't even know who to go talk to get those answers. That's really what made this become a borderline obsession because I didn't read the Bible, didn't go to church, didn't have anybody telling me the answers to these questions.
Really interesting. So you're actually out there looking for a higher purpose, and certainly, you know, as you go years down the road and you're in this intense firefight in Somalia of trying to help out these other guys that had crashed, you're going through this period where at what point would I understand you're absolutely terrified. And the other part of that too is because you come to some of these answers, you've got this total calm on you, which actually helped out some of the other guys. But I want to still stay on this thing for a minute, because it's really interesting to me that you're looking for a higher purpose. And then the second part of that is you're probably feeling anxious, like you said, because you don't have the answers. And so there's more questions than answers, and you didn't know where to point because you didn't have the right structure in your house or in that small town, right? That could really lead you down the path of possibly if you consider this or that. And so now we go from 13, you're on your knees, you're starting to I guess, learn the power of faith, if that's the right word. At what point, because now you still go through high school and you're doing a lot of high school things, and now at 18, you decide to make this major decision that has had such an impact on your life, who you are today and what you're able to accomplish. Where was it really starting to lock in for you between 13 and 18 of was there a pastor, or was there a person, or was there somebody who sat down and helped provide those answers for you in terms of what you thought is today and was probably back then the truth, in terms of powering forward?
Yeah. So when I get to the recruiter's office this day, what I'm really asking them is, I want you to send me to war, and I want to get shot at, because I want to know beyond a shadow of a doubt I'm over this paranoia about dying. But it started really at 13. So I get out of my bed, I kneel down beside it, I pray. I don't even remember what the words were, but the prayer was basically, Jesus, I believe you're real. I need you. Will you forgive me? Will you change me? But more than that, will you take away this fear of dying? And then after that, I just felt like there's something different. Something happened. I can't explain it. I don't even know if I can put my finger on it. But I just get up and I start going to church after this. And I mean, just walking to the nearest church by myself as a teenager, nobody going with me. And at some point, it occurred to me, and this may have taken a few years, it occurred to me, you know what? I haven't had any bad dreams about dying. I haven't had those persistent thoughts that keep me awake at night. I think I may be over this, but I'm not sure. So at about 18, I'm in high school, and I'm thinking, I'm going to go figure out if I'm really over this. And the ultimate way to figure it out is to go get shot at and see if you're really over this fear of dying or not. Now, you go tell an Army recruiter that, and they're going to think you're insane, and they are not going to let you in the military. So don't use that approach if you're getting ready to start a career in the military.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. So okay, so let's fast forward the clock then, and you find yourself, and I'm just gonna name some different places you've been.
Sure.
Okay.
Fire 'em away.
Yeah. So you've been in Panama, you've been in Somalia during that crazy period. You've been in Afghanistan for a number of, I think, 9 different tours. You've been in Iraq. So you've certainly have had your fair share of conflict, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in time, in one of those various pit stops, and for sure Somalia is one of them, but it could have been Afghanistan, it could have been Iraq, it doesn't really matter. But the first time when you've got bullets flying over your head, and now you're just at like holy moly moment with, all this stuff for my entire life. So it could be 0 to 19 or 20 or 21, whatever that number was. But now that you're realizing that dream of what happens if I get shot potentially, where is that now kicking in? Like all this belief that you had up to this point, is that allowing you to be calm in that moment? Or the first time that happened, it was like full panic?
Yeah. My first combat tour was the invasion of Panama, December of 1989. I'm 20 years old, and I've been in the Army for a couple of years, and I'm a sergeant. And all of the old guys that had some combat experience, and very few people left in the Army had any combat experience, but all the old guys told me, when you go to war, this is what it's going to be like. So the first time I got shot at was in the invasion of Panama in Operation Just Cause. And to be honest, the bullets were far enough over my head that it just seemed pretty cool. It was a lot of action, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of excitement. You know this. And then after it was over with, then I realized, you know what? I could have got killed last night, but I didn't think in those terms in the middle of the fight. It was just reacting to what's happening around me. My first combat experience, though, it did cause me to start to realize how short human life is, because some of my buddies that were 19 or 20 or 21 years old got killed in Panama next to me. And man, I like to tell audiences today, we live our lives like we're going to be around forever. We know deep in our back of our mind, it could be all over tomorrow, but we live like we're going to be around forever. And I want to challenge people, look, don't take things for granted. You got stuff that needs to be done. You got problems in relationships, something that needs to be said. Get it, go out there and take care of those things, settle those things, because you might not have a chance tomorrow. You may not be here. The person that you need to talk to may not be here tomorrow. So don't take for granted that tomorrow, that you're going to have a chance to settle stuff tomorrow. Panama taught me that. A year later, I'm involved in Operation Desert Storm in Kuwait. And again, I'm in a firefight. But again, the bullets are far enough over my head that I don't think this is it. Tonight I'm going to die. So by the time I get to Somalia, I'm a 24-year-old squad leader, but I've already been to war twice before. This is not my first rodeo. So I got a little idea of what it's going to be like. All of my men, almost everybody that I went to Somalia with, nobody had any combat experience. So they're looking at me. You recognize this from the NFL. I'm the 24-year-old old man out there with lots and lots of experience. And I just felt like people were looking to me. They were watching me and the way that I was going to react. What was different about Somalia is just how violent and just how overwhelming the enemy was. In Panama, I had guys lock themselves up in their own handcuffs and turn themselves into me. In Desert Storm, the Iraqis surrendered by the thousands. In Somalia, we got greeted the night we got off the airplanes with enemy fire, and it was every night. You could set your watch to it. We got attacked, we got rocketed, we got mortared. It was every night. And on every battle that we did, every mission that we did in Somalia, it just got a little bit more and a little bit more intense. By the time you get to the last mission that Task Force Ranger did in Somalia, by the time you get to Black Hawk Down, not just me, everybody that's in the city streets that night comes to the point where we all believe that's it. Not going to see the light of day. There's no way any of us are going to get out of this alive. And it's just a sheer matter of math. There's just way too many of them, way too few of us. Doesn't matter how good we are. When you're fighting those kind of numbers, all of us are going to die. And that is the moment where my faith probably made the biggest impact in my life, but not just on me. It started to make an impact on the guys around me too.
Just amazing. And I can't even imagine being in that kind of situation where, you are faced with that intensity of this could be it and what's going through your mind. Backing up just a little bit, you were talking about a lot of us in life live like it's going to be forever, when in the reality, you just never know when your number's going to come up. And I've been questioned quite a bit about my recent climb up Mount Everest, and certainly the other 6 around the globe, 7 summits altogether, the highest peaks in each continent. And it's really for that exact same reason. It's just like there are so many more statistically people that drive out on the freeways wherever they are in the United States or worldwide, and they get hit. Or I had a buddy just a month ago. He was a guy that was a quarterback for the Raiders and became a longtime NFL coach. And he went out one day before he was supposed to report as the quarterback coach for the New York Jets. And he was out in Northern California just riding his bike. Simple as that. And he was hit by some young kid who was texting and, flew up and, brain dead and died. And that was it. Right. And so, that was obviously tragic, but again, it's just like really seizing that moment and appreciating those people in your life, why they're there, because you just don't know. It doesn't have to be in a firefight. It can just be out doing something recreational.
Yeah. I agree. And frankly, one of the things I love about your podcast, just what I've heard about it, is if God is placing a mountain in front of you or your listeners, and you think, I'll get around to it tomorrow or next week. Yeah, maybe you don't get around to it tomorrow or next week. So if there's a challenge in front of you, man, go for it, tackle it, and don't let anything hold you back. I think I learned this as an Army Ranger, but it's carried with me for the rest of my life. Don't make the mistake of living with regrets, thinking I thought I was going to have time to take care of something, and then I didn't, and I ran out of time. Or the person that I wanted to talk to, they ran out of time. So if there's some weirdness between you and another person, go figure it out, get it straight. Don't waste any time, because you may not have a chance tomorrow.
Yeah, I like to think about it too. And I'm going back to when you're 18 and you're in high school, coming out of the small town, and now you go to this Army recruiter, and you're kind of facing a lot of your fears. And if we stick on that word for just a minute, the word fear, I think part of the thing for me, having, the name of this podcast is Finding Your Summit. It's very, very metaphorical, right? But at the end of the day, it's really stepping into that fear. Of crossing that threshold, doing something you haven't done before. Like you said, approach that person that maybe you've got some wonkiness with, buttoning up those relationships. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things that could fall under. And you don't have to go climb Mount Everest. You don't have to go to Somalia, right, in a firefight, to get this dialed in, to really understand what that means. But when you say, be the best version of yourself and go after those different things, I mean, to me, that's really like stepping into the fear, going after things that people don't think you can do or want to tear you down for. And that's where life really becomes fulfilling. And then you walk around like you are, and our common friend Tom Flick, with this bright light of you haven't, I don't know if you've figured it out or I've figured it out, but certainly you're on a path towards, going in the right direction, and that bounces off others, that because you've actually walked the walk and talked the talk, of being in these situations.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I hope people that are listening to you right now are getting this. I don't consider myself an expert on much of anything, but the two things that I know really well is fear and death. And I'll tell you, when you're facing fear, you can either turn and run from it, and it will chase you for the rest of your life, or as intimidating, as overwhelming as it may seem, just turn around, face fear eye to eye, stare it down, and see what happens next. And I don't want to give the false impression that it's always going to work out awesome, because it might not, but at least you have faced your fears, and you don't have to be the kind of person that runs from your fears, because they will chase you for the rest of your life.
So I want to talk about a fear that to me would have been terrifying, and for you, you went and did it, and it looked terrifying just seeing the movie clip. And you end up in 2013, going back to Somalia. So this whole incident went down in 1993. And so one of your pals, a producer or somebody, said, hey, let's go back and like revisit this scene where the movie was shot, Black Hawk Down. And as I'm watching this trailer, Return to Mogadishu. Yeah, I said that right. Yeah. And as I'm sitting here watching this trailer, it just looks like a complete chaotic, like just, the buildings torn down, bullet holes in the wall, people alongside the road, tents, just like insaneness, right?
Yeah.
And as an American, and what that all like added up to is just a lot of insecurity, especially as an American walking into this. Like, I would fear for my life from the minute I touched, on the tarmac. What was that like for you to go back and relive that moment?
Yeah, great example. So I was in Somalia. There's an actor who plays me in the movie Black Hawk Down. And when people ask me about Black Hawk Down, I tell them, listen, take what you see in the movie. It's very accurate, but it's not even close to as violent. Multiply the violence by a factor of 10 or 20, and you'll get an idea of what it was really like for us in Somalia. Many years later, I'm out of the Army. I'm retired. One of my good friends from Somalia, a guy by the name of Kenny Thomas, who is a successful Nashville musician, he and I stay in close touch. He's kind of closer to me than my family. War will do that to guys and gals. And Kenny says, Jeff, I need to go back to Somalia because there's something that I'm struggling with on the inside. And I think I can only get this thing resolved if I go back into the same ground that you and I fought in back in 1993. As you just said, this is 2013. And I've just retired from the Army a few years before this, but I'm still pretty connected to the intelligence community in the United States. So I know exactly what's going on in Somalia. I know all of the reports, and not what the news is reporting. I know what's really happening in Somalia. At this point, I'm a pastor. That's what I do now. I've had this overwhelming conviction that the Lord wanted me to no longer be a shooter kicking in doors and killing bad guys, that he wanted me to minister to warriors and to serve them and minister to their soul. So it's 2013, and Kenny says, Jeff, I need to go back to Somalia, and I need you to go with me because I can't go if you don't go with me. And I wish you could hear the levity in the phone call, because this is over the cell phone. I'm like, Kenny, this is the most dangerous city on the planet right now. Look, I know the intelligence reports. You got a guitar, I've got a Bible. If the two of us go to Somalia and we get in a firefight, this is going to be a total disaster. Are you kidding me? This is a really, really bad idea. And he said, no, I'm not kidding you. I need to go, and I need you to go with me. And it was this easy for me. I said, Kenny, if you're telling me you really, really need to go, yes, I'll go with you. But I just need you to know we're probably going to, both of us going to get killed over there. Because this is a friend of mine who's saying, I'm struggling really bad, and I need you to help me. And the only help is for me to go back and to walk that, well, relive the same ground that we fought over. So in this documentary, there's a documentary crew that describes this, because we didn't really tell a lot of people, but when word got out, people were like, are you two insane? You're not really actually going back there, are you? And can we bring cameras and record this whole thing if you two are crazy enough to go back there? So when we get there, we arrive at the airfield. This is the place where Kenny and I stayed while we were in Somalia. And we're making plans to go back out into the city and kind of walk or tour back through the battle sites that he and I fought from. And when we started to make our plans, everybody, all of the security personnel, everybody, even the Afghan or even in the Somali army said, yeah, we don't go back into the part of town that you guys fought in. Nobody goes into that part of town. So we make this plan that we're just going to kind of tool around the outside of town. We'll see the sights, and then we'll go back to the airfield. And while we're in the middle of touring the outside of town, Kenny calls me and says, Jeff, why don't you just tell your driver to take over and let's go back into the bad part of town, which is what I did. And while we were there, everybody got to the point where we all realized this is a good chance that we're all going to die in the next few moments. And what the documentary really shows is what it felt like to roll back into the city streets that we fought in 20 years earlier. Just the issue is that Somalia is just as dangerous, and Mogadishu is in worse shape in 2013 than it was in 1993. So we get in the middle of the Bakara market, the Black Sea part of town, and both of us realize, yeah, this is about to go bad. This is going to go south real fast on us. And the documentary really shows that. This incident. But the reason I go back, and my wife to this day thinks that I'm clinically insane for doing this, is just because my friend says, I need to go, and I need you to go with me.
So I was going to ask you about that. Like, you and it'd be like Tom and I, he asked me a favor, but the real hard work is not so much getting on the plane, which is still like a huge barrier of entry, so to speak, but now you got to lay this down on your wife and other people
that didn't go well.
I can't imagine, because you're, like you said, these are your words. We knew that we were pretty much signing up for a death sentence if we went back to Somalia.
Yeah, and my wife asks me point blank, what on earth are you thinking? Why would you do this? The Army isn't sending you over there. Every time you've gone to war before this, the Army sent you there. Why are you doing this? And my only answer is, my friend needs me to do this. And if he needs me to do this bad, I'm going to do it. though I may not come back alive, I need to do this for him.
And
And he really did need me to do that bad.
yeah, and so now we're here in, I know it was 2013, and now we're here, talking in 2021. And we've been out, I think, of Somalia for a long time, and what is it about that particular region that makes it still so dangerous for Americans to come in?
Spoiler alert, I survived in 1993 and in 2013, or else we wouldn't be doing this interview
Yeah.
today. Yeah, Somalia is a case study in what could go wrong and what has gone wrong when there's no government, when there's no police force. I'm not going to get political, but I will say all of the morons in America that are arguing to defund the police force, I want to take them on an airplane to Mogadishu, Somalia, and tell them, I will show you exactly what it looks like when there's no law enforcement, there's no military, there's no government that's stopping men from doing anything that they want to do. Because the only thing stopping evil is good men and women standing in the middle and making the declaration. It will not go any farther than this. I will stop it from happening. You don't have that in Somalia. And so you have a couple of groups of people that rolled in the door. One of them are basically like drug lords. There's a drug trade. It's a local drug that happens in Mogadishu. These guys realize I can make a lot of money because there's no government and no military to stop me. And they started using drugs as the main source of commerce. People watching this or listening to this podcast, you may remember Somali piracy, Somali pirates taking over major vessels in international waters. And if you want to know why would Somalia have piracy? Well, it's because every other country would stop this from happening, would stop their own citizens from doing this. But in Somalia, there's nothing stopping people from doing this. So you have Navy SEALs that are just shooting and killing them because nobody else will stop them from doing it. But the third and probably the most dangerous factor in Somalia is a group of Islamic terrorists called Al-Shabaab. And Al-Shabaab has basically blown up and killed anybody who tried to bring law and order to Somalia, the country, but especially to Mogadishu. And Al-Shabaab just realizes I can do anything that I want here as long as there's no government, no military, and no law enforcement. And if anybody tries to start a government, we blow them up. If law enforcement starts to train, we're just going to assassinate them all so that we can keep doing what we want and nobody can stop us. And what you have in Somalia for about the last 30 years is a picture of what lawlessness looks like. It's the Wild Wild West without, the marshals and the sheriffs rolling in and stopping, outlaws from doing whatever they want to do. That's Somalia.
Insane, right? I mean, it's so wild, because I think that we all at some level love to be governed by some rules, right? Yeah. And just common sense. And ultimately what you're trying to create is some kind of utopia that, it's peaceful. It's, you don't fear for your life and these other things, and to be in that type of thing. So let's move forward. So that's all. That is just so fascinating to me and crazy, what you went through. Yeah.
And I just add real quick, man, Mogadishu is this city that's right on the coast and right on the Indian Ocean. It is a beautiful city. It's just completely lawless. It could be one of the world's greatest resort cities. It's that beautiful. Except for there's just no rules, wild, wild west. Everybody's got guns and killing one another. So, I mean, it's really sad what this city could be and what it is today.
Well, there was a scene that, you guys are flying in a helicopter or plane or something where you're shooting back along the coastline. And to me, like you said, it looked like I'm staring at Hawaii, the beaches of Hawaii or something. It looked really beautiful. So now you go through, as you were talking about, and you you're decorated for different things that you've done, heroics that you've done, and you're in Iraq and Afghanistan and these other places. At what point in time did you decide to move on and like, you know what, I've done my deal and now it's time for me to go on to my next phase in life?
I had this personal policy that I was going to stay in the Army as long as I could stay, as long as I wasn't holding anybody back. I didn't want to be the player on the team that everybody else knew couldn't hold his own weight anymore, was holding the whole team back. So as long as I could physically handle it, I was going to stay in the Army. And by the way, I stayed with the Army Rangers all the way to the end. Had one or two assignments outside of the Rangers, but almost my entire career with the Army Rangers. And the second reason was I decided when it's not fun anymore, as long as I can still hang with the young guns and as long as it's still fun, I'm going to do this. The day where it's not really fun anymore, doesn't matter how long I've been in, doesn't matter what they offer, what the Army offers me next, I'm going to just walk away. And when it was time for me to retire, I was just a few weeks short of 23 years. I loved every minute of the time that I spent in the Army, but there was no question it's time for me to go. And I haven't looked back, hung up my boots, and just I'm thrilled at the men and women that I've had a chance to serve with and the things that I've been able to do for our country. But when it was time to go, I took the uniform off and looked forward and not back.
Well, that's hopefully the way that we end, all of our careers, and we transition and reinvent, right, on who we are and where we're trying to go and make life interesting in that particular way. Today we're talking on August 25th, and the last week has been a week of chaos in terms of our transition out of Afghanistan. And do you have a point of view? I'm sure you do, in terms of somebody who served. You were literally over there, and now all the trillions of dollars that we put in to build, and there's this retreat as we're doing now, and bailing out, and so on and so forth. Do you have a point of view in terms of do we do it right? Do we do it wrong? Was it the right timing? However that goes.
Yeah, I have very strong emotions about Afghanistan. As you just pointed out, I did 9 different combat tours to Afghanistan in the Army. And I spent more time in Afghanistan than any other country in the world by far, except for the United States. So I care deeply about Afghanistan and I care about the future of the country. In fact, my son served in the U.S. Army. He served as a Ranger, and my son deployed to Afghanistan. And my son and I still talk about Afghanistan a lot. Because what's happening today, August 25th, in the news is the Taliban is just rolling across that country with absolutely no resistance whatsoever. And it really, really hurts to see what's happening. Would the timing of this change anything? My answer is no. In fact, I've done several interviews over the last couple of days and told people if this were to happen 10 years earlier or 10 years later, I don't think anything changes until the people of Afghanistan decide I'm ready for a government that will protect our borders. I'm ready for a government that will keep the Taliban at bay. And what you're seeing in the world news, it's just shameful. I mean, the Taliban rolled across Afghanistan faster than Nazis rolled through France in the Blitzkrieg at the start of World War II. It's unprecedented, the speed at which they're advancing across the country. And it is creating a bit of a humanitarian crisis. But what's really sad is there is a lot of great men and women, Americans as well as coalition forces, that shed their blood to give Afghanistan a chance for freedom. And then the president of the country, like a cowardly dog, got on an airplane and flew away instead of standing his ground and fighting to protect his country. And when that happens, I don't know that much is going to change. Yeah. It's sad.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. And Biden was he just put to end what I think, a lot of people were thinking over the years is like, why are we doing this? I mean, our country here in the U.S. has enough issues, as it is. And for us to build up and protect and everything else, that the people of Afghanistan, to your point, are going to stand up and fight and protect their rights, then, it's certainly not our responsibility to be the protector of them going, day to day. I mean, the whole thing is unfortunate, but moving on to we'll say better and more, better things, period, is I want to talk about what you're doing today. You've made reference to this a couple of times in terms of, I know you're a pastor. How are you helping others, in terms of the way that you minister to them and give them hope? A lot of people sometimes, things aren't going well and they need, like you were a 13-year-old kid and you got down on your knees. How is that, impacting your life and the lives of others around you?
Yeah. Warriors are my heroes. They've always been my heroes. I don't look up to, Marvel or DC superheroes. I'm a guy who says the guy or the gal who puts on a uniform and goes and puts their life on the line, that's my hero. So I had the privilege of serving right outside of I had a privilege of serving in one of America's largest military bases for most of my career, Fort Benning, Georgia. And the neighboring community to Fort Benning, the north border to that military base, is Columbus, Georgia. So my wife and I, high school sweethearts, we retired here in Columbus, Georgia, so that I could spend the rest of my life ministering to warriors. It all started for me in Somalia because my buddies that were there when the battle was over with, they watched me during that firefight, and they said, Jeff, you have something that I don't have. There's something different about you. And whatever it is that you have, I want that thing. And I think that was the incident that the Lord used to move my life into a direction that I never considered. I became an Army chaplain, finished out my career as a chaplain in the Army with the Rangers, and then retired in this massive military community just so that I can continue to invest in the lives of guys and gals that serve our country and their families, and to be there for them. And to be one of the guys that can say, listen, I know exactly what you're going through because I've been there. In fact, you can watch it on the big screen. And I can tell you the difference that real, genuine faith in a very personal Savior makes. And so that's really what I want to spend the rest of my life doing, man. It's just looking warriors in the eyes, taking care of their families, and ministering to their soul.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because, you've kind of traded one purpose into another purpose, and you had this extreme life of adventure and all these different exotic places you're in with, dangerous situations. And now you're not necessarily in dangerous situations, but you've rechanneled that energy into something where they're going through those things. And since you've actually been in their shoes, you can, I'm sure, very much relate to what they're going through and what they need to do to get out of it.
Yeah, I try to be the kind of guy that I would have wanted somebody to be for me when I was 21 years old and a sergeant in the Army. I just try to be that kind of guy for them.
Yeah, I know you've done 5 books, and one of the titles that really jumped out at me again goes back to this word fear, but the road to unafraid. And I've never heard it put it that way. And so, is this book mainly strategies, or is it stories in terms of how you kind of arrived to that point in your life?
Yeah, I'll give you guys the secret. First, I fought with the publisher about that title. I did not want that title. I wanted a different title. And they said, your title will not work, Jeff. We're going to put fear in the title, but you can't use the word fear because nobody will buy it. We're going to use the word unafraid. I'm like, okay, whatever. But the secret behind the book is I basically use my stories from the Best Ranger competition, from Somalia, from Afghanistan and Iraq. And I tell about 11 chapters worth of stories about this. And then in the last chapter, I'll tell you guys the truth. The book takes a very different approach. And it says, okay, you've heard a guy who's been in dangerous situation over and over again. Now let me tell you how I really handle fear. And what I tell people is the antidote to fear, the opposite side of fear, is not courage. You have to have fear in order for real courage to exist. No, the opposite of fear is actually some kind of genuine faith. faith in something that's bigger than you, something that can get you through the most difficult circumstances. I'm talking about the kind of stuff where you say, there's no way I'm going to make it out of this thing alive. When you have faith in somebody that's bigger than you, then you can handle life's greatest fears. For me, that someone bigger than me has a name, and I refer to him as Jesus Christ.
I certainly was in that space about 3 months ago, coming down Mount Everest, snow blind, no oxygen, hadn't eaten in 3 days, and had multiple angels on my shoulders. And so if you want to get to that edge, like you were in Somalia and I was on Mount Everest, you know, I mean, we don't wish for those things, but those things from time to time actually happen, and you better be able to tap into something higher.
Right.
So listen, where can people find you? Because you've got just such a great story. You've got so much great content. You're a wise man for your years, and you've been just of such a great service to our country. Where can they find you?
Thanks, man. You can find me on social media just about everywhere that says Jeff Strueker, or just go straight to my website, jeffstrueker.com.
Great. Awesome. I love it. Listen, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. It really is fascinating. I mean, I could literally turn this into a 15 series podcast with
let's don't do that, right?
But we're going to keep it contained in the gist. So again, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story.
Much, man.
All right. There he is, the one, the only Jeff Strueker. Thank you so much.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.